All right, welcome everyone to the DRC Evacuation Focus Area session. Today's topic is external partners. We're going to talk about local and regional pediatric evacuation coordination. As a reminder, the Pediatric Pandemic Network is supported in part by the Health Resources and Services Administration of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. However, the content presented today is that of the authors, our speakers, and it does not necessarily represent the official views of, nor an endorsement by HRSA, HHS, or the U.S. government. We will be offering CEs and CMEs to physicians, nurses, and social workers. Couple of reminders down at the bottom of the screen, the requirements to obtain these CE credits. You must attend the entire live session. You need to ensure that you complete the session evaluation at the end of today's slides, and make sure your name is on the session registration. If, however, someone has forwarded you that registration, you're going to have their name, and that's okay. On the ellipsis around next to your camera, your picture, if you will just click on that and then go down to rename and make sure your name is on your picture. That way we know that you were here and accounted for. And then you can go into the portal to claim those CE credits with the code and all the information again at the end of this session. So we are recording. That recording and the slides will be posted to the website early next week. So you can be looking for that. We'll also send it out in the follow-up message email. So please add your questions to the chat. We'll have a lot of questions throughout as well. You can raise your hand. We'll bring you off mute if we need to, or you can just put your questions in the chat. But make sure we're asking these questions. We have 4 wonderful panelists today, and they are here to share their expertise, their insights. And so we want you to ask them questions and really pick their brains. The current priorities for DRC, as a reminder, we are in the phase of doing our drills. And so the first drill will hopefully be by the end of the year, is what we're hoping you're able to do within your hospital. We have drill materials for you. We have a toolkit. It's a package, it's downloadable. It has family cards, patient cards. We'll go over all that. But we have that available for you. But just be thinking about your drill if you haven't already, and hopefully you have that scheduled. That's where we are in the task list for DRC. Here is our agenda today. I'm going to hand it over to Annette, and then we're going to have a panel discussion, and then we're hopefully going to have time for breakouts, but at the same time, we're kind of incorporating that breakout into the panel discussion as well. So again, bring those questions. Let us hear from you. And then we've got some great opportunities for DRC and PPN coming up that we'll talk about at the end of today's discussion. And with that, I will hand it over to Annette.
Thanks so much, Julie, and welcome everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces and new ones too, especially those that are on our panel, which is going to be fantastic today. So let's take a look at our objectives. So today we're focusing on what it really takes to coordinate a pediatric evacuation when multiple hospitals and coalitions and partners are involved, which is what's going to happen anytime you'll need to evacuate a hospital, right? So we'll look at how logistics, communication, and relationships come together or sometimes fall apart. when time is critical. Our goal today is really to walk away with some practical strategies that strengthen coordination across systems. We're hopefully going to identify the barriers that get in the way and learn from some real world examples that our fantastic panelists are going to share with us. And then hopefully you guys share with us also in the breakout sessions about what's working or what's not. So without any ado, let us switch to the next slide. Before we jump to our panel, we wanted to share actually a real world example that's from RAPM, so Western Region Alliance for Pediatric Emergency Management, that was presented, maybe a month ago now, but it really highlights how a behavioral health facility and its partners work together to safely evacuate really pretty vulnerable patients with some time constraints. So it's a great illustration of coordination in action. And Julie is going to drop the link for that in the chat. All right, next slide, please. This is what I'm most excited about. We, again, have a really incredible panel lined up, and I'm lucky enough to call all of them friends and colleagues. Many of you already know Pat. Like, if you don't know Pat, then I don't know who you are, but she's affectionately known as the Disaster Queen, and she is going to kick us off by setting the stage with lessons from several real-world evacuation events, both planned and unplanned. And joining her are three fantastic Utah partners, and that's why I know them. Tal is representing Utah Transit Authority, and he brings that transportation and patient movement perspective. Tom is from Fire and Ops, and he's going to share first responders and on the ground view. And Eric is bringing in that healthcare coalition voice, connecting hospitals and EMS and partners across systems, not symptoms. Each panelist is going to have about 8 minutes, including time for questions. So they're going to do a little bit of a presentation so you can get some of their context. And then we'll open the floor to your questions. And we have some questions just in case you can't think of any, but hopefully you can. And then we'll stop at about 8 or 9 minutes in for each of them and then move on to the next presenter. So without any more ado, I'm going to turn it over to our disaster queen, Pat.
Well, thank you so much. And let's just dive in. You know, when we consider evacuation, it is always a last resort. It is triggered when staying becomes more dangerous than leaving. Whether it's a flood, a fire, earthquake, or power failure, every evacuation tests how we can move staff, stuff, systems, and space under pressure. So the best plans are going to fail without people who can carry them out. And in Hurricane Katrina in 2005 showed this vividly. The staff at New Orleans Children's Hospital worked through chaos with no air conditioning, no water pressure, and hospital evacuations in Katrina carried infants and children out by boat, car, and even flatbed truck. Teams across 5 states ended up mobilizing thanks to a coalition of the willing called the Southeastern Pediatric Disaster Surge Network, which had just been formed a few months prior. During Superstorm Sandy in 2012, NICU staff at New York University Langone literally carried 21 critically ill infants down 9 flights of stairs, 5 staff per baby, some maintaining ventilations by hand and skin-to-skin contact to keep that warm chain intact. In terms of the stuff that moves patients or the patients don't necessarily survive the trip, the UCSF Mission Bay planned moving to a new hospital, moved 131 pediatric patients across San Francisco, about 4 miles, some on ECMO, some pregnant women in active labor. They used 40 ambulances, 110 personnel. They had the benefit of 18 months of planning. They discovered a shortage of critical care transport units and also isolating capable ambulances. And this was found to be a persistent statewide gap and here in California where I live. In the Tubbs fire in 2017, Kaiser Santa Rosa staff improvised when flames approached. They used wheelchairs, rolling office chairs, and even buses to move 130 patients 48 miles away, taking photos of wristbands with smartphones for ID tracking. In terms of command, coordination, communication, which is absolutely critical to make all of these things work, systems either enable success or they amplify chaos. During planned hospital moves, like the one at Children's Hospital Colorado in 2007 and Lurie Children's Chicago in 2012, coordination between hospitals, EMS, city agencies turned these massive moves into a controlled operation. Each had dual command centers, police escorts, and continuous situation awareness. In contrast, Katrina and Sandy highlighted what happens when systems break, communications collapse, situational awareness vanishes, and improvisation replaces structure. Every evacuation ends somewhere, but those somewheres may already be full. After Katrina, some pediatric patients were transferred as far as Kansas and Miami, hundreds of miles from home. And during the significant event readiness forum or SURF earthquake exercise held in 2022, it was projected that evacuating just two major hospitals in Southern California, Children's Hospital Orange County and Loma Linda, would require 40% of California's ALS ambulance fleet and multi-state coordination for receiving capacity. So the key takeaways from these experiences is that evacuation is not a transport problem. It's a systems of systems problem. Preparedness means building redundancy and flexibility into staff, stuff, systems, and space. Real world events show us that even with months of planning and execution still hinges on that communication, coordination, and calm leadership. For pediatrics, we must consider also that children on ventilators or ECMO may not be safely moved under disaster conditions. That reality should shape our ethics, triage, and resource priorities. So every successful evacuation, planned or improvised, teaches us that readiness isn't about perfection. It is about relationships, rehearsal, and resilience. Our challenge now is to take those lessons forward, and the next fire and flood and fault line reminds us what's at stake. And that's the end of my presentation, and I guess we're moving on to the next speaker before we have questions.
We were actually thinking of opening it up.
Oh, okay.
When you 8 minutes, but we can definitely move on. So let's see a thumbs up for those that would like to get through all the panelists, and then we can do individuals, or those that would like oh, Stephanie would like us to do all right, then I guess we're moving on. I love this pivot. We can do questions after. All right, we've got almost a consensus. So let us move to you, Tal. And please tell that story.
There's a couple of them. I hope I hit the right one.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Annette. My name is Tal Ehlers, and I am the Emergency Management Program Manager for the Utah Transit Authority here in Salt Lake City, Utah. The Utah Transit Authority covers 7 counties, and within those 7 counties, there's 80 jurisdictions that we serve, approximately 2 million people. And on our transit, with our transit between commuter rail, light rail, and buses and paratransit, we move about 120,000 customers every single day. So transportation is what we do. Getting people from point A to point B safely, that is what we strive for. When it comes to emergency evacuation, I would pose this question to you. Have you met your transit agency personnel that you may work with in a disaster scenario? And have you invited them to exercise with you? Have you asked them what their capabilities are? And I'll give you a couple of examples. When I talk about our paratransit capabilities and those buses are outfitted for our ADA passengers. They have the ability to secure mobile devices and wheelchairs. They do not have the capability to properly secure, say, an isolette. They don't have the ability to secure a gurney. Anything of that nature would have to be jury rigged, and we have found that out through exercising with our partners in the medical community. So a couple of different scenarios, because of the relationships that we have with our medical community, a couple of scenarios that we have faced in the last year. Last October, there was a circumstance at our children's hospital where they had a power outage and they were talking about evacuation. And based on the relationship with that hospital, with their emergency manager, whom I have known for years, we basically had communication that said we may need the Utah Transit Authority to be able to assist us with evacuations. Now, what would that have looked like? And fortunately, it never came to that. But what would that have looked like? Well, when we talk about uh, resource capability, what buses can I get in and out of the ambulance bays? Because I'm going to be using my paratransit buses. I'm not going to be using my 40-foot or my 45-foot large passenger buses. They're just not going to make it in and out of the parking lots. But the paratransit buses we do have. We had done an exercise a while back with this particular hospital where they brought out an isolette to see if our paratransit buses were isolette capable. And while we were able to go ahead and use the lift to load the isolette, when we got the isolette inside, we found that we could put 3 or 4 isolettes inside of a paratransit bus. However, securing them, it was going to be completely modified. And even if you were able to secure the isolette inside of the paratransit bus, you would still have a free floating child inside of the isolette if you were driving that vehicle. There was also we did not have the ability to power that isolette inside of that vehicle. And these were challenges that the hospital learned because of the fact that we made the time to get together, do an exercise, find out, hey, what can we do and what can we not do? So in this particular circumstance with the power outage, we did not have to activate our resources to assist with this, but we were prepared to. Another such example would be just a month ago in Salt Lake City, there was a call for a potential evacuation of a facility. And once again, they reached out to the Utah Transit Authority because of the relationships and said, hey, we're just putting you on notice. We may need some of your buses to help perform an evacuation of this hospital facility. I called up our general manager over paratransit, and within 20 minutes, he had 17 buses ready to go with operators. And so when you look at ambulance capabilities, or you look at maybe resource limitations, wouldn't it be great if you could reach out to your local transit agency and already have that relationship established, know what resources they have, what are they capable of doing? Maybe it is a circumstance where a 40-foot bus or a 45-foot bus would be appropriate, and maybe it's not. If we're trying to get in and out of ambulance bays and clogged parking lots, of course, those paratransit buses may be a better option. Even 15 passenger buses may be an option, but I recommend highly that you meet with your transit agency. Find out what they are capable of doing. Find out what resources they have. Find out what they are not capable of performing so that you can make alternate plans in the event of an emergency. And I also recommend that when it comes to transit, reach out to your school district. Find out what your school district has. I learned something just last week. We work with a contractor that does some of our paratransit work in a specific county, and he said, we have buses that are under our control that are not used for the Utah Transit Authority. And I said, I had no idea. I said, I didn't know that you had those. He says, yeah, we have like these 5 other buses. Would you want to use those in an emergency? And I said, absolutely. So build these relationships, find out what your transit agencies have, what they can do, what they cannot do. One more thing I'll bring up. and then open it to questions. I have been involved with the medical community for many years. I've been an AEMT for nearly 20 years. My relationship with the health preparedness coalitions, with the hospital community, maybe that's just unique to me, but it's a relationship that I've had for many, many years. And having that relationship is a really good thing. But when I talk to our health partners and our hospital partners, I tell them we are capable of moving your greens. I'm not capable of moving your yellows, and I'm not capable of moving your reds, because your reds and yellows, our operator, they're trained to move a bus safely from point A to point B. They are not prepared to give patient care, nor do we have the equipment, the oxygen, the jump kits, the AEDs. We don't have that on our buses. So we can help with greens all day long, but we don't have the capability to provide personal care to somebody who's a yellow or a red. That being said, this last week, we participated in a full-scale exercise with a healthcare partner, and the individual in charge of triage at the incident scene where we were doing the exercise, he said, well, I want to put greens and yellows on your bus. And I said, okay, we're happy to take your greens, but I'm not taking the yellows. And he said, why can't you take yellows? And I had to explain it to him. So once again, find out what your transit agency can do, find out what they cannot do, but build those relationships ahead of time. Find out what their resource capability is, and find out what kind of a resource option they could be for you in a disaster evacuation.
That was awesome. As you guys can tell, Salt Lake's been busy on the evacuation front, or almost evacuation front. And if you can see by the last name, Tal is married to the very lovely Julie Ann Eilers, whose picture is probably on your screen, but her live face is not. So let's move to Tom, who is pulling in this different perspective of fire and boots on the ground, and that operations perspective. Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Annette. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Apologies, with real world events and some health challenges, I don't have a ton of prepared comments, but I definitely wanted to bring up a few things that I've experienced. I have a pretty unique perspective as a member of Utah Task Force One, having deployed into multiple disasters, having been a paramedic on the streets for 20 plus years, and now 5 years in emergency management as our operations captain. I think the two major lessons I've learned when it comes to evacuation, one in the realm of planning. I think the biggest problem we have as an emergency management agency, as well as a fire agency, as I work with the healthcare community, I've been in the healthcare community as part of one of our local hospitals. And there's an expectation that we have some unlimited number of ambulances. We certainly have a lot of great resources with TALS buses and such. We've been able to utilize them for those greens and some of those types of things. But as I hear about hospitals planning for evacuation, I consistently spend time thinking, well, don't forget that if we, as Pat pointed out, as we're moving into an evacuation, it's a worst case scenario, it's a last ditch effort, and it likely is affecting the community and our response to the community as well. So one of the biggest things that I've found as I work with planners and I work with healthcare coalitions or hospitals, is to make sure we manage expectations of what kind of ambulance response, what kind of fire and EMS response, what kind of resources we have to bring to the table, while we're also working to support the local community as well. On the flip side of that, one of the most, I think, recent examples, Tal brought it up a little bit, was the potential evacuation of Intermountain Medical Center. I was a part of that response from the Healthcare Coalition side. And I think the big lesson I took from that, and forgive me, I'm an ICS instructor and a bit of an incident command nerd, so I spend a lot of time thinking about this. While I love that healthcare and EMS and emergency management spend so much time developing relationships and building those people that they can call for things, I think what we found in that event was some of those actually managed to circumvent the incident command process. At one point, I had been asked to secure some resources. I got in touch with an incident commander on scene, and they actually were telling me that somebody was looking for those resources and did not recognize that the somebody who was looking for those resources was me. So it had circumvented the incident command process, all with well intention and people trying to make things happen. But it did really highlight that one of the biggest gaps, I think, is the different incident command posts, the different incident command structures that develop in these incidents, and making sure that they're all collaborating and working together. I think that happens under blue skies during exercises, during relationship building, but I also think that needs to be recognized during the event, making sure that we know who's seeking out our fire and EMS incident commanders, making sure that those communication pathways are really robust, that everybody really understands what's happening around the event. Those are probably the two things that I would highlight for for challenges and barriers during evacuation. I really look forward to hearing some questions and following up with folks, taking advantage of some of my experience. But I think beyond that, I will pass it to the next person.
And last but definitely not least, we have Eric Anderson, who, Eric, please share with people a little bit about your coalition coverage area and any stories that you can bring
great.
today.
Thanks, Annette. Yeah, so my name's Eric Anderson. I am the Southeast Utah Healthcare Coalition Coordinator. I've been in this position for about 5 years, and we cover a large part of Utah. It's about 18,000 square miles, 4 large rural and frontier counties with primarily critical access hospitals. So as far as prepared comments, just a couple points for us. We believe that the Healthcare Coalition's greatest strength lies in its network, and its network goes above and beyond just hospitals and EMS. It goes into long-term care facilities. It goes into home health. It looks into dialysis treatment clinics, large healthcare clinics that do provide some emergent care. And we look at this unified response as absolutely key to our success in Southeast Utah because we are so geographically separated from each other. And we're very resource limited. So it's a key part. Kind of what we're focused on in our healthcare coalition, obviously, is medical surge. We're looking at traditional trauma surge in addition to pediatric, chemical, radiological, burn surge, and infectious disease. And so one thing that we've learned over the last few years of doing this is that plans alone don't save lives. Practice coordination does. And to get to one of Tom's points about ICS and using incident command, we've realized as we've done these exercises more and more, there's been a marked improvement in hospital incident command and how they understand the process works from an emergency management perspective. And that has trickled down into really, really good, not only inter-partner communication, but inter-hospital communication, as far as establishing notifications, doing a labor pool, getting the appropriate resources in place to meet that surge. And so what we've focused on is the general areas I mentioned. We have done several over our last 2 exercises that we did in the last month. We did a large full-scale mass casualty accident with a chemical contamination associated with it. And that was just awesome. I looked at the exercise we did at this hospital compared to one we did 2 years ago, and it's just such a huge improvement. The old adage that practice makes perfect is absolutely true. I spent a little time in the military, and we had a saying that you don't rise to your level of expectation, you rise to the level of your training. And it's absolutely true in healthcare as well. The more practiced we are, the more training we do, it really equates to a better response. And that's primarily what we've focused on. We're so resource limited down here. We really focus a lot on our communities that need additional help. We use intelligence collection, if you will, legal intelligence collection from EM Power. Most of you are familiar with that to determine who's on hospice, who's on oxygen, who's in dialysis. So we can kind of incorporate those areas into our planning. But the biggest thing is just making sure that we have a solid 5-year training plan. We're all working together, we're all invested, and we commit training to that plan, and then we exercise it with either tabletop functional or full-size exercises. And what we've found is the level of investment down here is significant. People are completely bought in, and it makes, when things go sideways, we're able to communicate and make a lot of things happen. So that's pretty much our focus.
The great synopsis from all of you. And now we get to turn the time over to you guys for your questions to this fabulous, diverse panel. You can yell out, you can put it in chat. Julia and I will monitor chat. You can put your hand up. We'll be watching the screen. So please ask if any of the comments that these gentlemen have and Pat have said so far have spurred a question in you, please ask it. And I guess while we're waiting, I will ask the panel, what is one real world lesson or aha moment from your work that you think pediatric hospitals could apply tomorrow?
Repeat the question. Real world what?
What's one real world aha moment that you think pediatric hospitals could apply tomorrow?
I know from my perspective, meet your transportation partners. They are not, unless they're involved, unless you're bringing them out to your trainings and your HPP coalition meetings and your exercises, they're probably not thinking about pediatric hospital evacuation. They're thinking about all the other million compliance issues that we have to deal with when it comes to transportation. Reach out, meet them, find out what they know and integrate them into your system so that they have a better perspective of what a hospital evacuation could really look like. Many of them probably really have no idea and don't know how to integrate. So bring them into your exercises now.
I think a perfect example of that is, I'll give a little more detail about the Tubbs fire with the Kaiser Santa Rosa evacuation. The fire happened so quickly, the wildfire happened so quickly, it was at their doorstep, and the police and the fire departments basically had informed incident command that they were going to take their last stand in a little while. That is a very tough and bad situation to be in, because there are no more options after taking your last stand. At that point, the incident command in the hospital ended up requesting the 4 buses that were critical to evacuating that hospital. What they had power. Thank goodness. So they were able to move patients down with the elevator, but that could have not been the case. They had providers that had to get on those buses in order to transport. And they established basically a medical control through their communication, either walkie-talkies or radios. I'm not exactly sure. But the dilemma then is that they didn't have a police escort. And so they got stuck in traffic with everyone else evacuating. And if anyone knows about what the evacuation was like during that time, I mean, there were harrowing situations where fire on each side and people just driving through a road, of black smoke and fire. That's a situation I think no one wants to experience, much less your patients in a hospital. But I don't know that they had even had a conversation with the buses, but they were able to get them. But what if they weren't?
Yeah, I think to tie on to Tal and Pat, I think, and going back to what I was talking about, really get to know your local fire and EMS agency, get to know your local emergency manager from fire and EMS, know how they work, know their incident command procedures, and know how to get tied into that incident command process. That would help to identify how we're going to get those buses through. So that's part of the incident command process. That'll help you keep in the loop of knowing when we're making those last stands, when we're making those critical decisions. So that's absolutely something that could be taken immediately, was just get to know those folks and make sure you know how you're going to integrate them into your system.
I think we have a hand up, Annette.
We do. Before we go to Shayna, though, Eric, do you have anything to add for that real world aha?
Yeah, I think for speaking of transportation and alternate care sites, making sure that you've thought of every possibility. We did a long-term care facility evacuation drill recently, and while we were doing that, one of their plans and one of their discussions was that they are expecting to be an evacuation location for a hospital. And in my 5 years of doing this, that has somehow escaped me, that I've never even considered a long-term care facility, because usually they're pretty full, but sometimes they're not. They have trained staff, they have equipment, it's not a bad option. So that was kind of, as we went through, had one event that kind of caught my eye.
Thanks. Shayna.
Thanks. First of all of this is really amazing, and using buses and getting to know your transportation experts makes perfect sense, because if they have all these extra supplies and ways to transport folks, it's brilliant. And certainly green patients, you can stick a whole load of them on a bus and get them where they need to go. I guess my question for you guys, and because this always seems to be an issue, is how do you keep up as people are changing positions, sometimes really frequently, and stay up to date with all of these amazing connections that we have? How do people stay up to date with those connections as people are changing over and not always getting kind of that handoff of who they need to reach out to and let them know that they're taking over that position? And then I just want to say, Stephanie put a comment or a question in the chat.
I'll take a shot at that, Shayna. For us, I think that's one area the Healthcare Coalition can really assist, is they do keep a running group. They are, should be doing weekly, if not bi-weekly, communication. And for us, we just had a new emergency manager at Blue Mountain Hospital come in. And so we have a complete presentation that we have built where we give them, hey, this is who we are. This is who our coalition is. These are the key contacts. This is our first meeting. This is kind of what we do to just, and then, oh, by the way, if you have questions on anything, we can hook you up with the appropriate person and kind of just facilitate communication. Make sure they have our cell phone number. They can text us day or night, because that is a real challenge, especially down here. Sometimes we have one person doing three people's jobs. And if they're gone, it can be absolute chaos, and it's probably worse up there where you're at. So that's one thing that we do.
The coalition issues are really, really important. And there was a comment or a question in the chat about the funding issues. And certainly that's a threat to, continuation of activities for coalitions. But, every state's coalition structure is different. In Arizona, and it sounds like in Utah, it's almost, coordinated at the state level, and also where the hospitals have more of a role and responsibility, which is as ASPR actually intended. In California, in statute, everything is county or home rule based, so to speak. And so the county EMS agency, along with the public health department, plays a much more important role in terms of facilitating the coalition process. And any funding for the coalition usually comes through them, which it helps support engagement. But what you need to know about the coalition initiative is that when the coalition started back in the day, at the very beginning, um, basically, it was a strategy to bring stakeholders together that hadn't been in the same room. It had really been all about the hospital preparedness program and funds which individual hospitals would be participating in, but there wasn't an emphasis on stakeholder engagement with fire or other stakeholders that were essential to disaster preparedness. Over time, that changed. And about halfway through the initiative, there was a very clear message that what came from ASPR, basically saying that coalitions needed to move to a self-funded model. And so, um, this has always been, a challenge with any government funding, but federal funding has a track record of only providing seed funds. And it is in everyone's best interest to, while you're building that network with this seed money and seed funds associated with disaster, that there is some discussion about how are you going to make this sustainable and keep people in these roles and responsibilities, because it is my observation, being in this world for too long now, so to speak, is that basically when the funding disappears or is significantly reduced, that you get a proportional decrease in engagement, which is a shame. It is not, and I don't have any idea how to fix that, other than, really forming a commitment to those public-private partnerships that are needed at the local level in order to make this work. There is no cavalry. And especially the direction that things are going now, and it's very painful. But at the same time, it's really important to have those local connections. Those are going to be your friends and family that are going to come to your rescue.
I think that kind of addresses the question that Stephanie put in the chat about in the face of potentially losing funding, right? There's a lot we don't know about what's going on at the top currently, and I will say that hopefully the coalitions don't go away, or especially the coalitions in Utah, because we've got some pretty incredible leaders like Eric, who are just doing a fantastic job. So
I think I could leave today and our
Annette?
coalition would be okay. We're set up for success. We're working well together. If funding went away, I think we would still drive on.
Yeah, a lot of the coalition have moved to a nonprofit model, but we also have to think about sustainability in our roles and grooming the people who are, who are much younger than us to, as part of all those lessons learned and pass on that tribal knowledge.
Hey, Annette, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can, Kathy. You'll be our last question.
Okay. One thing I was thinking when Tal was talking about buses and greens, I was wondering if in that drill they were using like more train type triage colors, or were they using MCI triage colors? And the reason why I thought, wow, I never really thought of that before, and it's an important clarification. In the event of hospital evacuation, I can see how if some people said, hey, we'll only take greens, they would say, we have no greens. Like, technically, if you think an admitted patient probably shouldn't be a green, right? Like if you're evacuating a peninsula from an event, yes, take all these greens, get these people out of here. But in a hospital, the train category for green is more like they would need a BLS. And so I think when we're planning these events, we need to make sure that everybody understands the lingo. And so I'm curious for Tal, when you say greens, would that be like BLS ambulance transfer patients, or like triage green patients, mass casualty triage green patients?
And you'll have to forgive me. I've lost my video and I have no idea why. But can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
we hear you, Tal.
Okay. All right. So when I talk about greens, typically for an emergency evacuation, understanding it from the BLS standpoint, but also from the mass casualty standpoint, I'm looking for walking wounded. And I'll tell you that our bus drivers, let's see, our bus drivers aren't going to know what, the difference is between MCI or BLS, but walking wounded, maybe that's the term that they would more likely understand. But, without getting too technical, it's basically the people that don't need life-saving interventions for them to get from point A to point B. That's what I'm looking for to be able to transport safely. If they need life-saving intervention, they shouldn't be going on a bus with just an operator and no nurse, no medic. They just need to be walking wounded. I don't know if that helps, Kathy.
It does. Have you guys, and the answer may be that it just wouldn't be allowed, but are there, under disaster circumstances, situations where a nurse could travel with the people on the bus? Or is that start to get too hairy with licensing and?
I was afraid you would ask that, and if my video was on, you would see the smile on my face. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys this, but this is going to be more of the exception than the rule. I understand what that looks like. And I've had this conversation during an exercise. I've never done it real world, but I've done it in exercises. I had a fire chief that was an operations section chief that was tasked with finding ambulances for patients, and he was out of ambulances. And so when it came to our paratransit buses, he said, "Okay, can we go ahead and put a yellow or a red on your bus?" And I said, "No, we can only have green because we can't provide patient care." And he said, "What if I throw a paramedic with a jump kit and the oxygen and AED on there?" And I said, "Yep, do it." Now, that's me with my medical background and understanding. Would I do that under those circumstances and that kind of an evacuation or that kind of an emergency? You bet I would do it. But that's me. Make those relationships with your transit agencies so that they understand that possibly that could be an option. I mean, you look at the Aurora, Colorado shooting, law enforcement transporting bleeding patients with no intervention in the back of their patrol cars. Or you look at other scenarios like Vegas where people were taking Ubers to hospital. So where Pat was talking about evacuating people in the backs of flatbeds. Hey, you know what? We're going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to make it life safety. Have those conversations ahead of time, though, so that if it was like, okay, if I need your paratransit bus and I've got a red, but I'm going to throw a medic on there, can we do that? I'm going to say yes every time.
Yeah, and the thing is that, I mean, you mentioned the Aurora shooting, Tal, and a part of the issue was logistics in terms of ambulances not able to get there quickly enough, and law enforcement, playing such an important role in terms of transporting patients, even though they did not have equipment to stop the bleed, so to speak. That's a little different now. But, the same situation arose in New Orleans, and as far as that's concerned. And, there are swim lanes. There are swim lanes to some of this response. And if you don't have a conversation or a relationship with the people in those swim lanes, that fire, the EMS, the transportation district, your public health, your sister and brother hospitals, and other community health systems, they're going to make assumptions about what is expected and is going to happen in an evacuation that may not be compatible with what you're planning to do. And the only way we solve those problems are through conversations with, and sometimes it's just one conversation at a time.
So this is Shayna. I would just say too, if the National Guard is called up or you have military resources, we do this. If we run out of military ambulances and it's like a mass casualty event or whatnot, we'll put people in a truck with a medic or someone trained in buddy aid if we don't have a medic. And Eric will be familiar with this. And so that is something that we're trained to do and that we do on the military side. And so I think it makes absolute sense to have these discussions, like Tal was saying, to do it on the civilian side, because when it's a disaster and you just need transport and you need to get people out of there, people are willing to change the way they would normally do it during a blue sky scenario.
Yeah, Sheena, I'm really glad that you mentioned that. I just want to mention one more thing about evacuation. Most of what we know about large-scale evacuations from hospital comes from planned moves. Planned moves are 12 to 18 months in the planning. They have plenty of resources, but most of those moves happen, it still takes anywheres from 8 to 12 hours to move a whole hospital, and they're only moving the patients like less than 8 miles away. When we're talking about evacuation, especially catastrophic evacuation associated with either multi-state response like Katrina, that is a whole different animal. And so as part of your evacuation plan, I don't know who said it, you need to have, a plan, a backup plan. And you're going to have to figure out where is a safe place to stage until you can get all the resources you need and the solutions to where you're going to place patients. From your processes and your systems that are put in place. But life safety is critical, and you will do everything and anything to get those patients out, no matter how sick they are. It's just that the risks to survival in patients, increases with that level of, danger. It's dangerous.
Some fantastic discussion. Julie and I have just been texting frantically back and forth and decided that this is so fabulous that we wouldn't end it. And instead of maybe going to breakouts, what we do is go into polling so that our panelists can see some data from all of the participants that are online. And then maybe afterwards, in that maybe like last 10 minutes that's left, we can just open up those panel questions to the entire group versus going into smaller groups and then reporting back just because of time constraints. So everyone stay online. Julie, let's do some polling questions so we can get an idea of what participants have and what they're doing. And then after we have that data, we'll move into some more questions.
All right, so you should be able to see the first poll. Which external partners are currently engaged in your hospital's evacuation planning? And you should also be able to check all that apply. So. Seeing a lot of healthcare coalition. About 92% of you, so that's good to see. The next one is local EMS and ambulance services. And then law enforcement.
Tal, are you seeing the public transportation authority involvement? You're the perfect person to have on this, it looks like.
Seeing a pause, so I'm going to share so you can all see the results.
So that jurisdictional state leadership and the public transit authority look like they may be a little of a weak link. So Pat, maybe you can talk to some of that jurisdictional and state, and maybe we can have some more questions.
Yeah, I think again, the jurisdictional and state issues become important when you are um, uh, seeking resources that are out of the area or as part of mutual aid. If you don't have those relationships, and that is basically the conduit for that is through your ICS structure. And that's why it's so important to have joint command and a unified command associated with these events, because they are your pathway. They're, you know, the pathway is that they may ask you questions about where they can get those assets, but a really robust coalition that is integrated with the Med Health branch as part of an ICS unified command will be able to secure those resources, but they're not going to be coming immediately. So again, it's the relationships and the relationships with your jurisdiction and understanding how ICS will be triggered and joint command and unified command will be triggered. There's been lots of I shouldn't say lots, there have been reported, case studies where, the incident command of the hospital waits for fire or police to make the decision to evacuate the hospital. That shouldn't, and they're only going to do that if things are very, very dire. So, that's a huge gap and a failure of leadership to a certain extent. Having said that, leadership in a hospital, this is the last decision they ever want to make in terms of that because it is so dangerous. To evacuate the hospital. This is also why, especially if you look at what's happening, with severe storms and flooding and look at what just happened, in Florida. I mean, there are hospitals that are building seawalls and there are, and have rethought how they're going to create their robust infrastructure for water. They're building there's hospitals that are sinking drills for fresh water because it's those lifelines, the same community lifelines that FEMA wants and emergency managers in your jurisdiction want to preserve. You have to preserve in order to keep your hospital standing and avoid, or at least reduce the risk of making those tough decisions about evacuation.
I would add to that as well, kind of go back to the collaboration piece though, as well, I don't think that hospitals should wait for us to make those decisions. We have too many decisions to make anyway. We absolutely can be a partner with you in that decision. We can help you understand the risks that you're facing, the resources that we bring to the table. We can really be a very constructive partner with you in that decision to make the evacuation choice and make sure you make an informed decision based on our strategies as well.
Are you saying teamwork makes the dream work, Tom?
I am. I am. I think I've said it a few times, but
if there's a team, that's so weird. All right, Julie, next poll.
Okay, so next poll. What's the greatest barrier your hospital faces in coordinating with external partners for pediatric evacuation? Again, this is multiple choice, so choose as many as you want. Staffing constraints, leadership engagement and buy-in, lack of memorandum of understanding or agreements, communication challenges, limited transportation resources, they're unsure or not yet engaged in coordination. And then we added other. And if you have another barrier that is not mentioned here, feel free to type that into the chat.
So I guess we can throw it back to our panel, right? Because I mean, this is for our panel, do you guys have any ideas about how folks can get leadership buy-in? Is there an aha you can share?
Well, it'll cost them a lot more money if they don't. And if you can make that financial case, that those things are well documented. They are well documented, but and that's going to have to probably be, part of the picture. It is cheap investment in preparedness compared to what recovery looks like, and which goes on for decades, and people keep on paying and paying and paying for it in all sorts of ways, both financially and also from a mental health and well-being perspective.
So that fiscal carrot, Pat, telling them they'll save.
Got to make the case.
Eric and Tal, I saw you guys laugh when Pat started speaking. It looked like you had similar thoughts. Any other throw-ins about leadership engagement?
From my perspective, I think Pat is spot on. I also think establishing credibility with leadership early on goes a long ways. So if you do have to have that hard conversation, when you have it, your credibility is established and they know it's not a knee-jerk reaction. You've done deliberate risk assessment and analysis of the situation, and it carries some weight, which is sometimes hard to build, that trust and credibility, but it's super important.
So is that pulling in the HVA, Eric, which is about to happen?
Yes.
Well, and I think, pulling in the HVA also in context with the jurisdiction and the people around you. And that's one of the values of coalitions, is that, you can get a snapshot of what a shared HVA is, because for every disaster that hits an individual facility, how you respond and recover are going to depend on what kind of shape the other partners in the jurisdiction are in.
So Tal, I'm pretty naive. Does the transit authorities also do an HVA?
And I apologize again. I don't know why I'm having difficulty with my video, but as far as doing an HVA, are you suggesting like doing an HVA, the transit agency, in coordination or cooperation with the healthcare facilities?
No, I mean, my question was more centered around, and it's my own lack of knowledge. I didn't know if the transit authorities also do some kind of HVA for their state routes, etc.
Yeah. Yes, we do. So yes, we do.
I wonder if there's an opportunity for the transit authorities and the hospitals in specific locations to, again, kind of look at the risk dependent on hospital location, and maybe even use not only the hospital risk, but also the transit authorities risk too in the tie-in to engagement with leadership. So now you've got two kind of independent analyses that talk about probability, and then get engagement that way, or more engagement that way.
And Annette, you're right. And that once again comes out to building those relationships, sitting down, having those hard conversations, and addressing the reality of what can happen or may not happen. And I would much rather see plans include the reality than somebody building a plan for evacuation in a bubble, assuming that people are going to show up when they're really not. I myself am guilty of that. For about 9 years prior to working with the authority, I was an emergency manager for a rural community. We had about 30,000 people. We had a transit service that was administered by our Association of Governments. They only had, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 different buses. And hey, they were in all the plans. Boy, they were in ESF 8. They were in my emergency operations plan. Of course, we were going to reach out to the transit agency and we were going to use their facility, or we were going to use their resources in the event of a facility evacuation. Did I ever reach out and exercise with them? Not once, and shame on me. We cannot assume just because it's in our plan doesn't mean it's going to happen. We got to have those conversations ahead of time.
Hey, Tal, for your transportation HVA, I think also, you're looking at threats in a similar way in terms of your integrity of your roads and your transportation routes too. And that is so important because your planned route for evacuation may not be there. So bringing that data to the table is absolutely, critical.
Absolutely. And we discussed that as well, depending on what the event is, what the incident is. If it's a large scale earthquake, that can change everything. And I've got to bring this up too when we speak of reality and planning, depending on what your emergency is, an emergency evacuation may not be immediate, or these resources responding may not be immediate if we physically cannot get there. And you look at your fire there in California, some of these different circumstances, Hurricane Katrina, whatever. If you physically can't get there, you can't get there, and it may take a while. I talk about, primary children's, or I talk about Intermountain Health, and yeah, hey, we were ready to go in a half hour. That's great. Yeah, but that was on a circumstance that only affected the hospital, didn't affect anything else. But if you had something that broke up your roads, knocked down your power lines, caused gridlock, yeah, now it's a whole different scenario.
Yeah, that's why I'm such a fiend about staging.
You're no fiend, Pat.
I am a fiend about staging. You build that into your plan because you're going to need a place to kind of hang out until you have resources to move.
I think we have one last poll and then we'll turn it over to Julie to close us out. But man, I'm all tingly. My armpits are sweaty. This is a fantastic conversation. We obviously need more of this kind of discussion. And so this is great.
As they're filling this out, Annette, I'm having a hard time since my car thinks I'm apparently driving during my Zoom meeting of raising my hand. I have no idea. I can't find it, but so I'm sorry that I'm barging in. But
just jump in. You're one of the bosses, so you can interrupt at any time.
Well, one thing I love to share with the group is that in Charleston, after the Boston Marathon bombing, we have a 10K run that basically takes anywhere from 35,000 to 40,000 people and crosses the Ravenel Bridge into the downtown Charleston Peninsula. And after Boston, they really came together as a community, a region, and a state, and said we are really going to make sure we have top-notch preparedness for this. And it has turned into an annual, it's still an event. Obviously, it's a mass gathering, but it's become almost an exercise every year where we spend 3 months together. And we've kind of gotten to be what we think of more as a well-oiled machine, where the meetings aren't as intense as they were in the beginning. But, there's a medical subcommittee, and that group meets and they talk about, like, if something happens on the peninsula, how are we going to get the greens out? How are we going to make sure that MUSC, which is essentially the one hospital on the peninsula, isn't going to get hammered? But the reason why I'm bringing it up is if people look in their area and maybe through their healthcare coalitions to say, is there an event where you guys, in the purpose of preparedness, are coming together every year in case something happens? So a mass event. And if the hospitals aren't at the table, can we get at the table? And because it just really becomes this amazing opportunity to have everybody there, and you network, you get to know everybody. And over and over, when things have happened in Charleston, like the AME church shooting, when they said, why did this go so smoothly? We become like a broken record. It's the bridge run. It's the bridge run. So that's one thing where I would say is, if you have one massive event in your area where they plan for, if you as a hospital are not at the table, see if you can and get your coalition at the table, because I could not give any better advice, and that's probably been one of the highlights of my career is getting to work with all those folks.
I love that, Kathy. And I love that you added one of the highlights of your career. You didn't add it totally sucked because of all the hours spent getting to know my partners and my colleagues and planning for the worst possible day. You said the highlight of your career. And I think that is really very telling about the value that brings to the table. So I want to just say thank you to our panel members. I know we could probably go on forever, but Julie and I, the first time we did this, we got bad ratings for going over time. So ever since then, I'm like, well, so Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out. But love you guys. Thank you so much for a fantastic panel discussion.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you to our panelists, to our participants for this great conversation. Really excited. So exciting things coming up as well for the DRC. So our next month session will be a full collaborative session. We want to hear from some of the participants. So if any of you have had have done your drill or an MCI exercise or anything you want to share with the larger group, we would love for you to report out 5 to 8 minutes. Just tell us how it went, your barriers, whether it went great or it was just awful and so many mistakes were made, because the way we learn is from those mistakes. And so we want to hear about all of it, and we can share, we can talk with the larger group. So if anybody would like to, please feel free to email me to report out on that. Then December 9th, we are going to have office hours. This is at the time of I'm going to butcher this. I'm so sorry. Pat, help me out. National Healthcare.
National Healthcare Preparedness Conference is during that time.
Thank you. And several of us are going to be at that conference. And so for the first Tuesday of December. And so we will not be having our regular session in December, but we are going to hold office hours on the second Tuesday, which is the 9th. So hold that time. And then we'll come back to this group in January. And then in February, we'll go back to our full collaborative session. So in the beginning, I mentioned that it's time for your drills, your first drill. So hopefully you have planned that. If you have already done it, great. Let me know. But if you need help with that, our fantastic drills and exercise team from PPN came up with a toolkit to help you out with this. It is focus area specific. It's downloadable packets. It's got they've got patient case cards, family member cards, and it incorporates the DRC process measures that we talked about last month, that we're asking you to actually measure improvement through your drill. We're going to have an orientation session for these materials. So we're not just giving them to you and saying, okay, have fun. We're actually going to have an orientation session, and Chris McCarthy will go through those with you. That's on Wednesday, October 22nd from 1 o'clock to 2:30 Central. And then there will be a recording after that. That link to the registration is also in the chat. And then next Wednesday, October 15th, starts our fireside chats. So we've got 3 fireside chats coming up. This first one is a part of a series. It's going to be the children and youth with special health care needs and children with medical complexity, awareness and preparedness fireside chat series. So the first session is next Wednesday from 11 to 12 Central. And it's going to be on why. Why should we incorporate these children in this population into our disaster plans. And then session 2 will be more about how to do that and tips to be able to incorporate them in. So that is, again, October 15th. You can register for both of these in one registration, also in the chat. And then next month, November 18th, we're going to hear from, again, from our mental health domain from PPN. And they're going to talk on the management of pediatric PTSD and comorbid symptoms within the framework of disaster response. So that's going to be another great one. Again, the link is also in the chat. If you are looking for CMEs or CEs for continuing education, your code is QUSGAX. And I'm going to put that and the session, let's move that out of the way, and your session evaluation survey in the chat as well, so that you have that, and you can go to the portal, log in, or you can text that code to claim those credits. Leave that up for a second. And then here is your QR code for the session evaluation. The link is also in the chat. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our panelists so much for sharing your expertise and your experience. Thank you, Annette, our fearless leader, for guiding us through today's session. And thanks again to the participants for coming and sharing your knowledge and questions. Everybody have a wonderful month.